This is no ordinary entry in the Hammer horror genre. This film, along with 1955's The Quatermass Experiment, put Hammer films on the map. In addition, much like Horror of Dracula is the most accomplished adaptation of its source material, The Curse of Frankenstein is perhaps the greatest film to ever come out of the Frankenstein story. Also, much like with Dracula, it's ironic due to it all but ignoring Mary Shelley's novel. The story begins with Victor Frankenstein in prison, due to be executed by guillotine when he's visited by a priest. He then recounts the tale of how he spent the majority of his life educating himself in science. Aided by his tutor-turned-collaborator Paul, Frankenstein's efforts soon result in the secret of restoring life to a dead organism. While Paul opts to use this discovery to save lives and aid in surgical procedures, Victor instead aims to take it one step further. He wants to create a completely new, living man. As his ambition grows, Frankenstein soon loses sight of right and wrong, turning his back on his cousin-slash-fiancée Elizabeth and devoting all of his energies to creating the perfect being. The story itself is fairly familiar to audiences by this point, but this version spends a great deal of time establishing the character of Frankenstein and his goals, which already fixes a problem I had with the Universal film. Although some scenes get a little repetitive, the tale is woven together in a way where there is enough time to really come to terms with the concept of bringing a person to life. Many discussions are had between Victor and Paul about the unethical nature of the experiment and how it differs from typical practices utilized by doctors. The script, while still in the style of a Hammer horror film, treats these concepts with the appropriate respect and intelligence. This is all complemented by the fantastic performances. As was the case with Van Helsing, Peter Cushing makes for the most engrossing iteration of Frankenstein to date, less outwardly sinister than Colin Clive, and more credible as a result. On the surface, the murderous lengths that he goes to would make him seem more evil. On the contrary, due to the character becoming more and more wrapped up in his work over the course of the narrative, it's relatively easy to buy that he would resort to more drastic measures sooner or later. Cushing perfectly conveys the endless ambition and sharp-witted narcissism of the character while always retaining some degree of charm and commanding intelligence. Acting opposite him is Robert Urquhart as Paul. Rather than coming off as spineless, he serves as the foil to Victor, equally knowledgeable in the subject matter while having a greater sense of right and wrong. Hazel Court also deserves some credit as Elizabeth, who does well at conveying the loyalty and love for Victor while never coming off as naive. Valerie Gaunt does not fare quite as well, lacking common sense and only being used to generate shock value later on. However, one mustn't forget Christopher Lee as the Creature. Universal was breathing down their necks, so the filmmakers had to differentiate the character from the monster of the 1931 film, to the point where he had to be called the Creature. Working with the more horrific design, Lee's portrayal functions with a base desire to kill. This is noticeably different from Boris Karloff's more childlike demeanor. Lee's version is essentially a being that lumbers around without purpose until he sees another life to snuff out. While this doesn't do much to generate sympathy, it's an effective performance nevertheless, and an appropriate departure from the earlier version. Also worthy of recognition are the sets, which are both elaborate and gothic in typical Hammer fashion. The laboratory looks much more practical here, containing all manner of instruments with which to conduct experiments. The ornate nature of Victor's home nicely contrasts with the lab, with director Terence Fisher staging the scenes to complement them both. Also strengthening the film is James Bernard's musical score, which provides the tense notes that you'd expect from the classically gothic horror. All in all, The Curse of Frankenstein occasionally suffers from repetitive scenes between its two leads and one or two weak links in characterization, but these do little to undermine its quality or the impact that it had on film history, boasting electrifying performances, impressively detailed sets, balanced direction, intense music, and a powerful script that manages to be both thought-provoking and horrifically shocking. This is one retelling that truly comes alive.